Recently, an online recruitment ad for couriers specializing in smuggling semiconductor chips has garnered attention. The ad alludes to the U.S.'s efforts to stymie China's economic development by cutting off chip supplies, causing a halt in China's electronics industry, and thereby heavily impacting its economy. Consequently, there's a hiring call for personnel to smuggle chips. The work involves transporting chips illegally rerouted from the U.S. to Thailand, then to China, with each trip carrying around 5 kilograms of chips. As it's a smuggling operation, some parts require walking through mountainous terrains. The remuneration for each trip stands at 150 yuan, about $20,000. An upfront payment of 80,000 yuan is given once the merchandise is secured in Thailand, with the remainder paid upon successful delivery in China. The advertisement explicitly states the cargo comprises chips and not narcotics. Curiously, the job post also acknowledges, although smuggling is illegal, it still contributes to our motherland. The authenticity of this recruitment post remains undetermined and seems more of a joke. However, considering Chinese electronics company Huawei's track record, chip smuggling might not be far from reality, even if the ad is a joke. The United States is indeed restricting chip exports to China, and it's impacting China's electronics industry. On October 17th, the U.S. government updated its export control regulations on AI chips, declaring its latest strategy to prevent Beijing from obtaining cutting-edge technology to bolster its military and surveillance capabilities. This means ceasing shipments of advanced AI chips designed by companies like NVIDIA to China. Such restrictions not only hinder firms like AMD and Intel from selling chips to China, but also impact chip equipment manufacturers like Applied Materials, Lam Research, and KLA. These measures have been dubbed by media outlets as the U.S.'s declaration of war on China, aiming to bombard its semiconductor development indiscriminately. During a press conference on the evening of October 16th, U.S. officials indicated that these restrictions prevent countries, including Iran and Russia, from accessing advanced chips and chip-making tools. Furthermore, 2 Chinese chip design firms have been blacklisted. U.S. Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo stated that the new measures are intended to patch loopholes from regulations launched last October, aiming to curb China's military progression. She highlighted the measures' purpose to limit Beijing's access to advanced semiconductors, essential for the growth of AI and precision computing for military applications. Raimondo emphasized that there's no intention to economically harm China, saying, "These export controls are meant to safeguard technologies with clear implications on national security or human rights." NVIDIA received a letter in August restricting the export of its A100 and H100 chips beyond China, covering parts of the Middle East. The letter also emphasized that the U.S. prohibition of chips to any subsidiaries located worldwide of parent companies based in China, Macau, and other arms-embargoed nations. This is part of efforts to prevent the illicit rerouting of chips to China or remote access by Chinese parent firms. The U.S. government has also imposed licensing requirements for semiconductor manufacturing tools to 21 countries beyond China and expanded the list of prohibited devices for these nations. Additionally, 2 Chinese AI chip startups, Shanghai Biren Intelligent Technology and More Threads Technology Beijing Company, along with their affiliates, have been added to the U.S. trade restriction list. This mandates companies like NVIDIA to obtain U.S. government permission before shipping to these firms. A senior U.S. official clarified that the rules issued on October 17th have eliminated communication speed restrictions, shifting focus onto computational efficiency. This implies that chips like NVIDIA's A800 and H800, previously sanctioned for sale to China, will now be halted. U.S. officials have disclosed that new measures expand the licensing requirements for exporting advanced semiconductors to over 40 countries. This is due to concerns about the potential rerouting of restricted products to China, putting these nations under U.S. arms embargo restrictions. A senior government official shared that, on October 17, the U.S. government introduced a new restriction on semiconductors exceeding a certain performance density threshold. Performance density measures the amount of computational power that can be accommodated in a set volume of semiconductors. The official pointed out that this regulation aims to prevent firms from attempting to bypass complete semiconductor restrictions by using a technique known as chiplet. Essentially, companies could try to assemble smaller parts into larger semiconductors that violate regulations. This latest directive is widely perceived as the U.S.'s most stringent regulation to date. It signifies the U.S.'s intention to suppress China's semiconductor development. NVIDIA's stock price plummeted by 7.8% on Tuesday, marking its largest intraday decline, since December last year. However, the company maintains that the new regulations will not significantly impact its revenues. We comply with all applicable regulations while striving to support products for thousands of applications across many different sectors, NVIDIA stated in an email. Given the global demand for our products, we do not anticipate any meaningful impact on our financial performance in the short term. As the U.S. seemingly doubles down on its embargo on the Chinese semiconductor market, many netizens in China cheered upon hearing the news. Many are pinning their hopes on domestic enterprises like Huawei, anticipating that they will rise to the occasion and counteract the U.S.'s move. So, how has Huawei, the Chinese tech titan, been performing? Can it carry the hopes of countless netizens in this pivotal moment? In late August, during U.S. Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo's visit to China, Huawei discreetly releasate its new 5G smartphone, Mate 60 Pro, employing 7nm semiconductors produced by Semiconductor Manufacturing International Corporation, SMIC. This launch garnered significant global attention in the semiconductor industry. However, Huawei remained tight-lipped about the specifics and brand of the semiconductors, both on their official website and during their September product launch. This silence fueled speculation. Nevertheless, the appearance of Huawei's new phone created a frenzy among Chinese social media users and official media. Videos of Huawei stores being swarmed and emptied by customers went viral, with many asserting that China had successfully broken through the U.S. tech embargo. On the widely debated topic of the phone's chip, Minetake Kashio, the CEO of Japanese electronics parts analysis firm Fomaha Technosolutions, commented that the processor, colloquially known as Kirin 9000, was indeed produced by SMIC's 14nm process, but tweaked with certain technologies to approximate a 7nm performance. This revelation prompted questions about potential gaps in the U.S. semiconductor export ban against Huawei. James A. Lewis, Senior Vice President and Director of the Strategic Technologies Program at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, responded to these concerns. He noted that those with such suspicions may not fully grasp the nature of the export ban, which has a shelf life because the targeted party would naturally seek alternatives. He stated, export controls usually last only a few years, and then people figure out how to work around them. Lewis likened the export controls to a tennis match. Lewis further remarked that the U.S.'s first step should be to determine how China managed to manufacture this 7nm smartphone chip. Following that, there's a need to review the current export controls and ascertain steps that can be taken to fortify these controls. The U.S. Bureau of Industry and Security, BIS, responsible for export controls, released a statement from the Department of Commerce spokesperson stating, "To be clear, export controls are but one tool in the U.S. government's approach to addressing national security threats posed by China. Restrictions implemented since 2019 have already put Huawei in a bind, forcing its reformation at a significant cost to the Chinese government." The U.S. began restricting exports of advanced semiconductor technology in 2018. The equipment required to produce these advanced semiconductors, known as extreme ultraviolet EUV machines, is exclusively produced by the Netherlands-based company ASML. Since 2019, the company has been prohibited from selling EUV machines to China. Starting September 1st this year, a ban was implemented on 3 high-end deep ultraviolet DUV devices produced by the company. Chinese companies can purchase these DUV machines only until the end of the year and only with a permit. The 7nm chip manufactured by SMIC used by Huawei is essentially equivalent to the chip TSMC produced in 2018. This suggests a lag of about 5 years behind international standards. SMIC, China's largest chip manufacturer, can now reliably produce 14nm chips. Due to SMIC's close ties with the Chinese military, it was added to the U.S. sanction entity list in December 2020. Although barred from acquiring advanced EUV lithography machines from ASML, SMIC can still purchase lower-end DUV lithography machines. By using the DUV machines and a technique known as multiple patterning, SMIC can produce 7nm chips. In December 2020, SMIC's co-CEO, Liang Mengsong, announced the completion of 7nm technology development. Development for 5nm and 3nm technology is also underway. In July 2020, Tech Insights discovered a 7nm chip produced by SMIC in products from the U.S. Bitcoin mining company Minerva. This chip, which began shipping in July 2021, allegedly copied TSMC's technology. Historical data suggests that SMIC, with its founder Zhang Rujing, to technical leaders Zhang Shanyi and Liang Mengsong, all formerly of TSMC, had previously faced accusations of copying TSMC's technology. SMIC had to pay TSMC $200 million in damages and transferred 8% of its shares to TSMC after multiple lawsuits between 2002 and 2006. The recent Huawei Mate 60, equipped with SMIC's 7nm chipset, is believed by analysts to have been manufactured using a 14nm DUV lithography machine, employing a process of 4 or more exposures to achieve a 7nm specification. TSMC, in its early days, utilized this method for 7nm chip production. However, due to a low yield rate, they transitioned away from DUV in favor of the more advanced EUV lithography machines to achieve mass production. Taiwanese tech expert Xu Meihua pointed out that Huawei, before the U.S. sanctions in 2020, surpassed Samsung with a global shipment market share of 21.4%, becoming the world's largest smartphone brand. Huawei shipments reached 105 million units in the first half of 2020 alone. Back then, TSMC manufactured Huawei's AP chips. Relying on SMIC's limited and increasingly outdated DUV machines, it's uncertain how much production is possible now. Adding to the challenges is the potential issue of part shortage for the older equipment. SMIC's 7nm process, though it has breached the 16nm barrier in the US, sought to establish as a tech limitation on China, lags behind approximately 2 generations or about 5 years. Given this, catching up to Apple seems an insurmountable task for Huawei, especially considering the Kirin 9000's processor performance is 2 generations behind the latest Apple smartphone chip. Yang Ruilin, Director of Research at Taiwan's Industrial Technology Research Institute's International Division, speculates that the chips used by Huawei were manufactured by SMIC using DUV machines, which were not under export control earlier this year. Furthermore, the 7nm chips produced by SMIC last July for a Bitcoin mining company had lower technical requirements than those for smartphones. Yang explained that while mining chips could be considered standard, smartphone chips are fully customized, necessitating higher manufacturing standards. He speculates that the 7nm mining chips from SMIC were a preliminary version for Huawei's current chips, confirming that DUV machines are indeed capable of producing 7nm chips. However, Yang indicated that Huawei would likely halt at 7nm. Advancing to 5nm or 3nm would prove challenging, as the production yield from DUV machines would be exceptionally low, rendering the commercial viability untenable. He further highlighted that using DUV machines to manufacture 5nm chips might result in a success rate of just 10 to 20%. For 3nm chips, the yield would be close to zero. Yang believes that Huawei's new phone will sell well within a year due to nationalistic sentiments, with consumers supporting the brand. Yet, as patriotic fervor subsides, consumers will notice a significant performance gap between Huawei's 7nm chipset and the 5nm Qualcomm chipsets used by Xiaomi, Oppo, Vivo, as well as the upcoming 3nm chipset in iPhones. Yang stated, by next year, brands like Xiaomi, Vivo, Oppo, and even Apple and Samsung will continually launch new phones, while Huawei loyalists will be left wanting. Huawei smartphones will always be confined to the 7nm technology. Even if SMIC replicates processes from TSMC or Intel, 5nm remains unattainable due to the lack of EUV machines. Taiwan has spent 3 to 4 decades maturing its chip manufacturing techniques. The Chinese Communist Party, CCP, rather than investing in basic research and talent cultivation, has often resorted to shortcuts, poaching talent, stealing technology, and spending big. For instance, SMIC's co-CEO, Liang Mangsong, who once worked as a senior R&D director at TSMC from 1992 to 2009, was a top technical talent and closely associated with TSMC's founder, Morris Chang. His expertise made him an attractive hire for SMIC in 2017, with SMIC offering him stock, worth $2.37 million in 2020, a $3.4 million residence, and a raise in his annual salary to $4.93 million. Under Liang's guidance, over 200 technical experts from Taiwan's Hsinchu Science Park were poached to SMIC. SMIC also paid hefty recruitment fees to headhunting firms in Taiwan, promising potential employees earnings in 3 years equivalent to a decade's pay in Taiwan. With Liang's involvement, SMIC rapidly advanced from 28nm to 7nm development in just 3 years. However, Liang admitted the impossibility of progressing beyond this due to the urgent need for EUV lithography machines. Over the past decade, the CCP has invested trillions of dollars in semiconductor projects, industry subsidies, and tax exemptions. Still, these endeavors often ended in failure. The CCP also heavily funded Huawei and SMIC. From 2017 to 2019, SMIC received over 4 billion yuan in subsidies from the Chinese government. In 2022, SMIC had an effective tax rate of only 0.72%, nearly exempt from income tax. The Chinese government even subsidized consumers buying Huawei phones, offering rebates up to 5,000 yuan. The CCP's ethics are questionable, always seeking ways to exploit gaps in U.S. and international regulations. The U.S.'s recent stringent technology export controls can be seen as a measure to plug these loopholes. Against such a rogue regime as the CCP, the U.S. needs to enforce strict controls on critical technology to prevent potential threats to the free world.